we go. Top of the hour with rain pouring over the southeast, causing just a huge mess and becoming deadly in one case. People, animals trapped by the floodwaters, crews racing to try to drain all of that rain somehow, but it doesn't seem fast enough. We are live on the ground. Plus, the former president making a very brief appearance on the witness stand in a New York courtroom today. Why his words had to be almost immediately stricken from the record. Then, Taylor Swift's repeat stalker showing up at her house again after having just been ordered to stay away from her. And it's not just her. Why it seems that when it comes to female celebrities dealing with obsessive stalkers, law enforcement tends to just kind of shrug it off. Plus, what Congress is doing about concerns that Americans' genetic data, yours and mine, may be right now taken and exploited by China. It's a story you will only see right here on NBC News Now, and that's in our original. And new changes being made to Facebook and Instagram to try to make it harder for strangers to talk to teens on the sites. But will it satisfy critics who say Meta has not done enough to protect teens? We'll see. Good day, I'm Tom Costello, and I am in for Hallie. We come on the air today with major flood concerns throughout the southeast, with more rain pounding the region. One person dead after losing control of their car, and it is a scenario that we've seen play out throughout the region. Take a look right here. A man used a ladder placed on top of his car to get out of a water-filled ditch that was outside of Houston. He reportedly hydroplaned off the road. Crews have been out rescuing both people and animals from flooded roads and neighborhoods. Right now, more than 25 million people under flood watches. Louisiana living up to its reputation along the bayou, the roads in some neighborhoods really just being overtaken by the water. And it's the nonstop rain that's creating such a mess because there's not much time for the water to drain away. In southeast Texas, 24 rivers forecast to reach major to moderate flood stages over the next day or so, if they haven't already. Overall, this month has been just an unusually wet one, right? From Texas to the Northeast, many areas seeing more than double their average rainfall. So we bring in now NBC's Kathy Park. She is in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Kathy, you're out at a dam, I understand, where they are trying to release water to prevent flooding. Tell us more about how that might work, and is it working already?
Hey there, Tom. Good to be with you. Well, right now, a big weather headline that we're tracking currently, in addition to the flooding, of course, is that dense fog. But if you can cut through the fog, I can promise you there is a dam behind me, and it certainly has been working overtime over the last 24 hours. We are told you have roughly 700,000 gallons of water that is spilling over. But compare that to this time last week, that number was closer to 440,000 gallons of water per second. And they're telling us there are a couple of reasons why we're seeing so much water right now, this runoff. First of all, this time last week, we were in the teens. Right now, I just checked here in Chattanooga, 65 degrees. So all of the snow that we got last week, 8 inches in some places in Tennessee, all that snow is melting. And then on top of the rainfall, several rounds of showers throughout the day today, and you have this huge volume of water. I can tell you the Tennessee River is right behind me as well. It's pretty swollen. But fortunately, Tom, no major flooding issues to report here on the ground in Chattanooga. But decades ago, before this dam was built, there were a lot of flooding issues. Take a listen.
Before these dams, this region was a terrible place to live. The river flooded, crops failed, people starved. These dams are a focal point that allowed navigation of this river and control of this river. We're not worried. We do this every day, and we've been able to keep our communities safe for the last 90 years.
And Tom, just taking a closer look at some of the numbers, we are told that the runoff, it's about 2 inches, and then you factor in all of the rain totals, 3 to 5 inches through Saturday. So we are definitely not in the clear as far as the flood risk goes here in Chattanooga and beyond.
You know, you've got that great dam there that's doing its job to protect against flooding, but a lot of areas don't have that, right? So what's happening in other areas? I mean, you've got just a tremendous amount of water right there in that area right now.
Yeah, absolutely, Tom. You showed it at the top of the hour, introducing the segment. You see a lot of issues right now in the Southeast. You just have saturated soil and then a whole lot of rain falling at a short amount of time. And that is leading to flash flooding, especially in portions of Texas, Louisiana. You are seeing some dramatic images of motorists stranded, cars stalling out. In fact, north of Houston in San Jacinto County, a judge issued an emergency declaration because the water was rising so quickly. So throughout the Southeast, here in Tennessee, across the South, we're not out of the woods just yet because rain is in the forecast tomorrow, as well as through parts of the weekend. Tom?
Kathy, I know you're living there in the Tennessee area, so stay dry over the coming days. Thanks very much. All right, now to a New York courtroom where former President Trump spent under 5 minutes on the stand in the civil defamation case against him, with some of his words stricken from the record just seconds after he started to talk. Mr. Trump tried to deny the allegations made by the writer E. Jean Carroll that he sexually assaulted her, saying he considers it a false accusation. But here's the thing. He can't say that. Why? Because that isn't up for debate anymore. A separate jury already found him liable for sexually assaulting Carroll. This trial is really only about how much money he might have to pay her. And what we're seeing here is another example of Trump's strategy as he faces this big web of legal issues to try to run out the clock until the 2024 election and then maintain his innocence no matter what. NBC's Rahema Ellis has been following the legal developments all day. Rahema, I've been watching you, listening to you. So talk us through the tense day in court, because the judge gave his legal team clear instructions and they weren't really following that, right? Tell us more about what happened.
You're absolutely correct. In fact, it was described as being incredibly tense in that courtroom. Even before the jurors came in for Donald Trump's testimony, the judge had to admonish Trump because he was talking and he said, I don't know who this woman is, never met this woman, referring to E. Jean Carroll. The judge pounded back at him saying, Mr. Trump, keep your voice down. You are interrupting these proceedings while your counsel is talking, and that is not permitted. Then when the jurors were brought into the courtroom, Donald Trump was sworn in. The first question he is asked, it's allowed. You took a deposition, yes. You stand by it, yes. And then the second question from his attorney on direct examination, do you deny the allegations to defend yourself? Yes. I consider it a false accusation. The judge said the jury will pay no attention to this. He struck it down. Did you ever instruct anyone to hurt Jean Carroll? No. I just wanted to defend myself, my family, and frankly, the presidency. The judge said all of that, except for the word no, is stricken from the record. Can't pay any attention to it. This all took 3 minutes in court, and then the judge said, that's it, and they'll be coming back tomorrow.
Okay, but it may have been stricken from the record, but the jury did hear it, right? So could that have an impact on their decision? And really, he's facing a potentially a very big fine, right? Millions and millions of dollars in damages.
Yeah, absolutely. They say it's hard to unring the bell. And take a look at what some of the damages are that he could possibly be facing. In this trial alone, they're asking the E. Jean Carroll case has already won $5 million from the first time that he was in trial, and it was found that he was liable of sexual assault and of defaming her. Now she's seeking $10 million in this case. An expert has testified that, and it would take about $7 to $12 million basically to repair her reputation alone. That's got nothing to do with the punitive damages that this jury is going to be asked to award him. Yeah. Basically, that's punishment in an effort to try and get him to stop saying defaming things about her. But he was doing that some 30-some-odd times just this morning, even before the court got underway. Tom?
Yeah, the question really is whether he thinks it's a price worth paying because he can use this as a stage for his re-election. Rahema, thank you very much. We appreciate it. Let's stick now with that thread of the former president's legal troubles, because down in Georgia, his lawyer is joining a motion trying to dismiss the election interference case against Mr. Trump over allegations made by one of his co-defendants that Fulton County DA Fani Willis is having an improper romantic relationship with one of her special prosecutors, Nathan Wade, and financially benefiting from that relationship. In a statement to NBC News, Mr. Trump's lawyer also accuses Willis of attempting to, quote, foment racial animus and prejudice to divert attention from her alleged improprieties. NBC's Blaine Alexander is in Atlanta right now. Blaine, you've got your hands, I understand, on these filings. In it, Mr. Trump's lawyers accuse Ms. Willis of potentially tainting the jury pool, right? How is that possible?
Well, Tom, I want to go to the genesis of this entire motion for dismissal, which we really have been talking about a lot over the past 2 weeks. And those are those explosive allegations that Fani Willis and Special Prosecutor Nathan Wade are having an improper romantic relationship and that she's financially benefiting from it. So what happened today is that Mr. Trump, through his attorney, signed on and said, yes, we agree with that. Those charges should be dismissed. But they went a step further. And that's what's so notable about today. So basically, what Steve Sadow is doing, he's the attorney for Trump here in Georgia, is he's pointing to a speech that Fani Willis gave on MLK Day weekend. She was speaking before a historically black church in Atlanta, and she didn't address the allegations directly, but she did speak out and say, hey, it's strange that of my 3 special prosecutors, only one of them, the black special prosecutor, is being attacked, while the other 2, the white special prosecutors, are not. Now, because of that speech, Sadow was saying that she is improperly injecting race into this entire thing, and potentially tainting a future jury pool, basically going against her oath of office by trying to make people feel a certain way toward the opponents here in this case. I want to read to you a segment from the filing today that I think kind of sums it all up. Basically, Sadow writes, these assertions by the DA engender a great likelihood of substantial prejudice toward the defendants in the eyes of the public in general and prospective jurors in the Fulton County in particular. Moreover, the DA's self-serving comments came with the added sought-after benefit of garnering racially based sympathy for her self-inflicted quagmire. So that's just one of the 6-page filings, but I think that kind of sums it up, Tom. You know, we reached out to the DA's office again, and their posture has been since the very beginning, they're not commenting. She will comment in a written filing, and the deadline for that is next week, Tom.
Okay, Blaine, thank you very much. Blaine Alexander, who's in Atlanta for us. Things got very emotional in a Michigan courtroom today in an unprecedented trial of the mother of a mass shooter, with a prosecutor pinning the blame on her for not stopping her son. Now, there's Jennifer Crumbley crying as the prosecution shows a witness video of the shooting where 4 Oxford high school students were killed. One witness, a teacher who was hurt in that shooting, told the jury about the moment she came face to face with the shooter. Well, we do not have that soundbite. We'll work on trying to get it restored. But as you can imagine, she was very emotional recounting seeing her shooter face to face there in the courtroom. But it is the mother who's on trial. This trial and another one coming up for James Crumbley, the shooter's father, are important because they mark the first time parents in America are being tried for the charges in the deaths of a mass shooting that their child committed. Both parents facing 4 counts of involuntary manslaughter, which could land them in prison for up to 15 years and a $7,500 fine per person. Now, per charge. Remember, Ethan Crumbley was sentenced to life behind bars for taking the lives of these 4 teens you see on the screen. NBC's Jesse Kirsch joins me now from Pontiac, Michigan, where the trial is underway. Jesse, we heard in opening statements today these conflicting perspectives, right, of how Jennifer Crumbley parented her son in the lead up to the school shooting. And it's really getting the blame here for really her husband, James Crumbley, also going on trial.
Yeah, and Tom, quick update that we just got. The first day of testimony has now wrapped for the day just moments ago. So we now are getting our first full day of a picture of the case being presented by prosecutors, and some of the questions from the defense team pointing to what you talked about just there, a wedge between these 2 parents. They are facing separate trials. Both James and Jennifer Crumbley are accused of involuntary manslaughter in connection with the 4 deaths, the 4 students who were killed by their son, Ethan, who was 15 at the time. He has pled guilty and is now serving life without the possibility of parole. This is from the scene earlier today. And the defense team making a point as early as opening statements of saying, quote, James was responsible for storing the guns. And to be quite frank, Jennifer Crumbley didn't know anything about guns. She did, however, go to a shooting range with her son. And there's video of her at the shooting range with her son that was played today. And so the picture that was presented by prosecutors is one where both parents were well aware of their son's interest in guns before this massacre unfolded. Here's part of what we heard from both sides in court today.
Jennifer Crumbley didn't pull the trigger that day, but she is responsible for those deaths.
The evidence at trial is going to show you that Jennifer Crumbley did the best she could as a mother.
So that's some of what we heard in opening statements, and then the questions unfolded from there, Tom.
You know, we mentioned the significance of this case here. This is something we're seeing play out for the first time. We know Jennifer is expected to testify in her own defense, but then there's this question of whether her son might also take the stand to testify on behalf of his mother.
Yeah, so at this point, Tom, what we have heard from Ethan Crumbley's defense team is that they are going to advise their client to not testify. He is in the middle of an appeals process. He is currently, as I mentioned, serving life without the possibility of parole. His attorneys are appealing his situation right now, and so they are going to advise him to not testify in this case. And you can just imagine how challenging this must be for this family and all of the other families impacted by this, Tom.
For all the other families impacted, I imagine so. Jesse, thank you very much. Here in Washington, Boeing CEO was on Capitol Hill today, again, talking transparency and responsibility, as all eyes are on Boeing, its reputation on the line after the recent Alaska Airlines mid-air emergency when a door plug blew out. Senators today say that their approach to fix what's happening at Boeing, it needs to be systematic. Take a listen.
It is a miracle that nobody was killed. Nothing is more important than ensuring that the flying public is safe and that they can be confident when they get on a plane, when you take your children and put them on a plane, that your family's going to be safe.
Senator Cruz there reiterating Boeing needs to work on quality control. Airline and FAA confidence in the plane maker has dramatically eroded after that incident 3 weeks ago and 2 fatal MAX 8 crashes overseas 5 years ago. Many passengers now express concern about flying on a Boeing plane, although they are flown every single day. Since the Alaska Airlines emergency, the FAA has grounded all MAX 9s. Alaska and United, the only airlines to fly the plane, have been inspecting their fleet for any signs of trouble. Without the MAX 9, both airlines have had to cancel hundreds of flights each day. Hundreds of thousands of passengers have so far been affected, and airline profits have taken a big hit. Now, as they complete FAA-ordered inspections, both United and Alaska plan to put their MAX 9s back in service soon. For Alaska, that could start as early as tomorrow and Sunday for United. NBC's Ryan Nobles joins us now from Capitol Hill, his home away from home. Ryan, the FAA has clearly run out of patience with Boeing, pausing any Boeing effort to expand the 737 production line. Boeing is already warning of delays in delivering planes as it struggles to keep up with orders it already has. And now lawmakers are talking about holding hearings to look into this entire Boeing mess yet again. We did this 5 years ago.
Yeah, I think it's pretty clear, Tom, that in addition to the FAA, you're sensing a real sense of frustration from lawmakers here on Capitol Hill who have constituents that rely on airplanes every single day. And the idea that any of their constituents may feel uncomfortable getting on a plane, or they have to deal with the delays and the headaches that are involved with an entire fleet being grounded is just something they want to see come to an end. And that's why you saw David Calhoun, the CEO of Boeing, come up here to Capitol Hill, not just one day, but 2 days to answer very specific question from a group of lawmakers that are on the front lines of these conversations. And the next step will be to call him in front of the Commerce Committee for a public hearing where he will get a public grilling that will add to the grilling that he received behind closed doors. And what we're told is that the wait on when that hearing will take place is because that lawmakers do want to give the NTSB time to work out their investigation into what went wrong with that Alaska Airlines flight so that they have all the information available at their disposal to press Calhoun on what Boeing's going to do to change things. But Maria Cantwell, the chair of that committee, told me yesterday, Tom, that they're not going to wait forever for the NTSB to complete their investigation. They will call Calhoun to Capitol Hill sooner rather than later.
Calhoun has already admitted they had a quality control breakdown. He says the blame is theirs. Listen, I got to tell you, I've talked to people in the FAA, and they have had it up to here with the Boeing. They really feel misled. And now we've got the Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg, saying there are discussions about how to oversee Boeing's manufacturing going forward. And it sounds like This system they have now of letting Boeing employees act as the FAA's eyes and ears and the plant, kind of deputizing them, it may not be working to watch quality control. That's been a real struggle, right?
Yeah, I mean, Tom, you know this better than anyone, but there does appear to be a serious lack of trust between the government and the oversight bodies that are responsible for monitoring plane safety, especially as it relates to Boeing. So, you know, if Pete Buttigieg, the Secretary of Transportation, is calling for that, if the FAA is supportive of it, I can bet that there's going to be members of Congress that will back him up in that regard. If it requires legislation, that is something that could certainly be a part of it. Of course, one of the things that is outstanding here on Capitol Hill is the reauthorization of the Federal Aviation Administration. That's something lawmakers have yet to put over the finish line. So some of the lawmakers that I talked to yesterday say that part of that package involves many of these issues that they believe Boeing is dealing with right now. So they want to get that done as soon as possible.
And would Congress consider giving the FAA enough money to hire dozens, hundreds of inspectors? I mean, that's a big question these days. Ryan, thank you. We're going to check back with you. Thank you very much. All right, new numbers out today show the economy, big news here, finished strong in 2023, crushing estimates for a year that many thought would bring the country to a recession. Look at this. GDP grew at the rate of more than 3%, 3.3 in the fourth quarter. And while that's slower than Q3, when it grew by about 5%, it is still much better than expected. And economists say this shows the resilience of the post-pandemic recovery underway, capping off a year when unemployment stayed at or under 50-year lows, inflation cooled dramatically, more indications that would point away from a recession. But are Americans buying all of this? The president hopes so. He's out visiting Wisconsin today, touting his Bidenomics plan. Take a listen.
The experts from the time I got elected were insisting that a recession was just around the corner. Every month there was going to be a recession. Well, you know, we've got really strong growth. We obviously have more work to do, but we're making real progress, building an economy from the middle out and the bottom up and not the top down.
Also, President Biden today endorsed by the UAW. NBC's Brian Chung joins me now to break down these numbers. Brian, let's look at the broader numbers, right, and how they square with how everyday people view the economy they live in. Because we have this Harvard poll that found that while young Americans have a positive view of their personal financial situation, a majority have a negative perception of America's economy overall. How do you square that up?
Yeah, well, I mean, here's the thing, and we have to acknowledge that consumer sentiment has been trending up. In fact, one measure has gone up by 28% just since November. So some of that has been changing. But look, broadly speaking, people are still dealing with the ripple effects of the high inflation that we saw in 2022 into the early parts of 2023. That picture has since improved. But when you look broadly, it takes time for things that are happening in the economy to be felt in Americans' households and the way that they're using their wallets. So when it comes to the overall picture, that we have to acknowledge, what happened in 2023 is pretty remarkable. I mean, you said crushing it. That's the right way to accurately portray this, because the story going into 2023 was concerns about a recession where you'd see the unemployment rate rise as the Federal Reserve raised interest rates. And instead, the Federal Reserve was able to raise interest rates. The unemployment rate never went above 4% for the entirety of last year. And the GDP numbers we got this morning verify that the economy grew in 2023.
You know, I think you're 100% right, but we still have inflation that's up something like, I don't know, 17% if you look at it from where we were 2-3 years ago. So when you go to the grocery store, people feel that. And they feel it in the housing market, right? Because mortgage rates are still very high. You've got to be making a six-figure income these days to buy a home. And then we've got another Harvard study here that says housing is unaffordable for a record half of all U.S. renters. Talk us through these housing numbers and how unaffordable stuff is if you just want to try to, you know, get out from under your parents' roof.
Yeah, and I think a big part of the economic feel that we have here is also the dream of home ownership essentially being watered down by these high mortgage rates and continuing appreciation of home values. So for a lot of millennials especially that have been trying to get into the market, and you're being dissuaded not only by the fact that the home price is up 20 to 30%, but that the borrowing costs to get that home are also going up as well. We're looking at a median of somewhere around 6.6% to get a 30-year fixed mortgage. So the story, though, is about supply, because we know that a lot of people that have homes right now are not going to try to sell it into a market that has 6.6% rates. So that settling has had a lot of existing home owners not wanting to go back into the market to sell it. So if there's not new supply coming online, then it makes that dream of home ownership even more unreachable. So can supply catch up? It takes time for home builders to make new housing supply. That's going to be a big story and something that a lot of economists are saying is going to be the real key to trying to alleviate these pressures in the housing market, Tom.
Yeah, and the strange thing is that really the numbers today were so remarkable because it does appear that the economy is shaping up pretty much exactly as the Fed had hoped when it started hiking interest rates to tame inflation. But this is an election year. Exit polls matter, and they just showed this week that the economy still is issue number one, right? So this disconnect between the real stats and the perception or the reality that people live with every day could be something that could be a problem for the president.
Yeah, well, here's the thing. There's still many months until the election. And the story here is that with inflation, we don't know what the development is going to be. There's concern even within the Federal Reserve, based off of what I've been hearing, that inflation could go in the reverse. It's been coming down over the course of 2023, but maybe it goes in the opposite direction. It's really hard to predict. If that happens, could that threaten the messaging that the Biden administration has been putting out there? Again, it's going to take time to see. Those reports come out on a monthly basis, and we'll be watching very closely.
You know, Brian, what I always say, economists have predicted 10 of the last 2 recessions. So be an optimist, Brian. You're a millennial. Be an optimist. All right. Check with you later. Thanks, buddy. Appreciate it, Brian Chung. All right. Today, explosive new allegations against the boss of pro wrestling WWE, claiming that he sexually assaulted, trafficked, and abused a woman, according to a new lawsuit filed by the alleged victim. The woman, who previously worked for WWE, claims Vince McMahon directed her to have sex with a wrestling superstar and other men. The suit also names another former exec and WWE itself. The victim is trying to avoid a non-disclosure agreement that she reached with McMahon back in 2022 after he agreed to pay her $3 million. She claims he only ended up paying her $1 million of that. The woman's lawyer says in a statement the organization, quote, facilitated or turned a blind eye to the abuse and then swept it under the rug. It comes just 2 days after TKO Group, the parent company of WWE, signed a 10-year deal with Netflix to stream WWE's Monday Night Raw. TKO Group, in a statement, says it takes the horrific allegations very seriously and are addressing this matter internally. NBC News reached out to the reps for WWE, Vince McMahon, Netflix, and others, but we've not yet heard back with any comment. Coming up from us, what the CIA director is trying right now to do to reach a hostage breakthrough in Gaza. Plus, the controversial execution set to happen in Alabama tonight. Why the first of its kind method is putting even the pastor who is giving last rites at risk. Stay with us. We're back, bottom of the hour, and tonight Alabama is planning to put to death a man convicted of murder using a method of execution never tried before in this country. It is so untested, the pastor who will be with the condemned man at the time of his death is also at risk. The state received the okay from a federal appeals court late last night to execute Kenneth Eugene Smith using nitrogen hypoxia. That involves strapping a mask to his face to feed him only nitrogen gas, no oxygen. The 58-year-old is on death row for his role in the 1988 murder of Elizabeth Sennett. And the state is using this method because prison staff failed to execute him by lethal injection 18 months ago when they couldn't find the right vein. NBC's Dasha Burns is in Atmore, Alabama. And Dasha, you spoke with the sons of the victim, Elizabeth Sennett, and they are just so frustrated that this has come to this point. Yeah?
Yeah, Tom, that's exactly right. They say they've been waiting for justice for 35 years, almost twice as long as they knew their mother. And I had a conversation with them today. They've been waiting for this moment. They already did this once. They came down here. They thought they were going to witness some closure for their family. That is not what happened. So here they are back at William C. Holman Correctional again today. Take a listen to what they told me earlier. How confident are you that the state will succeed?
Not much. 50-50. 50-50.
Mm-hmm. It's brand new. Who knows what's going to happen with this one?
I hope nothing goes wrong.
It's all about what's fixing to happen to him. But nobody's talking about what he did to our mother or why he's in that situation.
Now, they say that they have forgiven Smith, but they still want this closure, and they want as much focus as they can on their family and what happened to them, Tom.
You know, to their point, there really is no debating Smith's guilt, but there are significant questions about the method being used in this execution. And to that point, that even, I understand the pastor who is going to be with him is receiving last rites himself because being so close to this gas. And you asked him about that. Why is he going forward?
Yeah, that's exactly right. He is going to be in the chamber with Smith, one of the few people that could be at risk of exposure to nitrogen gas. He had to sign a waiver in order to be there to give him his last rites. He's done this many times before, but never quite like this. We watched him this morning say some final words before leaving his phone behind to his family. He has 5 children who, as you can imagine, are concerned about this. There have been very few answers to the questions that he's been asking, that reporters have been asking. There's a protocol that the state put out, but it is heavily redacted, so we know very little about how this is going to move forward. A very novel method. Take a listen to what Reverend Jeff Hood told me earlier.
I have never, ever signed a waiver before going into an execution. It's important to state that you know, the existence of a waiver in the first place speaks to the fear that they have that something could go wrong.
Now, the state says that they believe nitrogen gas is humane and painless, that they are confident this will be successful. But given that in the last year or so there have been 3 botched executions in Alabama, Kenneth already survived one, you can imagine that not only is Kenny Smith concerned, the Reverend is concerned, and the Senate family is concerned. Everyone going into tonight with a whole lot of questions, Tom.
That pastor deserves an awful lot of credit for doing what he's doing and holding that hand. Dasha, thank you very much. Dasha Burns. Let's get you over now to the 5 things our team thinks you should know about tonight. Number 1, CIA Director Bill Burns is set to meet with Israel's Mossad Director and the Qatari Prime Minister in Europe this weekend. They're supposed to discuss a potential deal to secure the release of the more than 130 hostages still held in Gaza. That, according to a diplomat with knowledge of the matter. Number 2, U.S. health authorities say 93 Americans have died after getting cosmetic surgery in the Dominican Republic since 2019. The report by the CDC says many of the deaths involved a procedure known as a Brazilian butt lift. And while infections can regularly occur after cosmetic surgery performed outside the U.S., deaths actually are rarely reported. Number 3, Stanley is responding to claims that its viral tumblers contain lead. A spokesperson tells NBC that while lead is used in the manufacturing process, the product needs to become damaged in order to expose lead, something the company notes is possible but rare. Number 4, former Trump White House advisor Peter Navarro sentenced today to 4 months in prison. He also has to pay about $10,000 fine for defying a subpoena from the January 6th committee to testify. Now, remember, he is convicted in September, was convicted for refusing to testify and provide documents to a House committee investigating the insurrection attack. Navarro has already filed an appeal. Number 5, listen to this. Actor Tom Hollander says he once received a different famous British Tom's paycheck due to their very similar names. This guy here, Tom Holland, basically, Hollander says he was once sent a 7-figure box office bonus that actually belonged to Tom Holland for the Avengers movie. And that's a movie that Hollander did not star in. And now to politics, with Nikki Haley still in the race, chasing frontrunner former President Trump. What's her path to a Republican nomination? Officially, candidates need to earn a certain number of delegates to win. Von Hilliard now explains the process in tonight's breakdown.
To get their party's presidential nomination, candidates ultimately need one thing: delegates.
Mr. Chairman,
Delegates and my fellow citizens, I proudly accept your nomination.
A delegate is someone, often a party insider or activist, who represents their community or state at these big party nominating conventions. One for Democrats and one for Republicans. A couple thousand delegates show up to each. Candidates earn delegates from getting votes in primaries and caucuses. So how are they divvied up? Democrats do it the same across the board. All statewide and district delegates are divided proportionally based on the election results. So if a candidate gets 60% of the vote in a state, they'll get about 60% of the delegates. But Republicans have a few different methods: proportional, especially in early states like in New Hampshire, or winner take all, where the candidate who gets the most votes gets all the delegates, like in Arizona. And then some states use a mix. The magic number is 1,215 delegates for Republican candidates to secure the nomination. If they don't lock in the majority of delegates ahead of time, it'll come down to the convention. Now, there are two main types of delegates. Democrats call them pledged and unpledged. Republicans call them bound and unbound. Basically, if a delegate is pledged or bound, they have to vote for a certain candidate at the convention based on how their state voted. But unpledged and unbound delegates can vote for any candidate. It's a small slice of the total delegates, but they could make a difference. Which brings us back to 1976.
We came from behind in New Hampshire and we won.
Through the Republican primaries and caucuses that year, incumbent President Gerald Ford didn't reach the magic number needed to lock up the nomination. A month before the convention, insurgent candidate Ronald Reagan trailed Ford by only 39 delegates, with 94 still uncommitted, which made the convention extra interesting. Ford ended up winning by about 100 delegates.
I am honored by your nomination, and I accept it.
Now this year, Nikki Haley's already trailing Donald Trump, with 17 delegates to Trump's 32. But over the last year, some state GOPs changed the system to favor a frontrunner, making the path to a nomination even harder for Haley. California's GOP, for example, adopted new rules ahead of this cycle. Any Republican candidate who wins more than half the vote there will get all the delegates. And California has 169 of them, more than any other state. What about the dozen delegates that Ron DeSantis and Vivek Ramaswamy secured in Iowa? The former candidates now backing Trump, but their delegates still need to support them on the first ballot of the convention. There is an exception, though, if there's just one Republican candidate left. Vaughn Hilliard, NBC News.
And NBC's Vaughn Hilliard joins us now. All right, so Vaughn, it seems like an uphill battle for Haley. So what do we know about why she's staying in at this point?
Tom, it absolutely is. And like it's outlined in there, Donald Trump would not become the actual nominee for the Republican Party until the middle of July, when the Republican National Committee is going to be hosting this year's convention in Milwaukee. So for Nikki Haley, at this point, she's the only other serious competitor against Donald Trump. So even if she's able to rack up some delegates along the way, and let's say, you know, Donald Trump, he potentially has criminal trials that are going to start before the convention as soon as March 4th. Those trials could last 3 months. He could very well be found guilty of felony convictions before that July convention. And they may be able and want to make the case that the Republican Party should turn to somebody like Nikki Haley that is not Donald Trump. And if she has some delegates already in the bank, well, she could make the best case that she's the next in line.
But if the delegates are locked up, that becomes difficult, right?
It becomes very difficult, but there is a situation at the convention where the full body of delegates could vote by a 2/3 share to upend the rules, and they could throw all of the previous rules aside, which would allow them to potentially pick somebody not named Donald Trump. Of course, the difficult part for Nikki Haley is that so many of those delegates are Donald Trump loyalists, and they have already made the case that even if he is found guilty and potentially even in jail, they will still have his back no matter what, Tom.
All right, Vaughn, thank you very much. Vaughn Hilliard, who is, as always, intrepid and on the story. When we come back, a man arrested 3 times in 5 days, charged with stalking and harassing Taylor Swift. Why it's so hard to keep stalkers away. Plus, how a police officer ended up finishing a food delivery after he busted the deliverer. That's in The Local. Well, you can imagine NBC News covers hundreds of stories every day. We can't get through all of them. It's tough to read, watch, listen to everything. So our teams have broken down a few highlights, and this is what they say is going down in their regions. We call this segment The Local. From our Western Bureau, police in Hawaii are searching for a suspect in a chemical attack that left a woman with severe burns. The man allegedly threw a liquid substance at the woman before running away. Police say the victim is in critical condition at the hospital. They are investigating this as an attempted murder. Out of our Northeast Bureau, the rogue bull who went viral last month after getting loose and then running onto a New Jersey transit train, at least the tracks, well, he's now in the hospital. The animal sanctuary that took him in says Ricardo is battling a life-threatening infection. They're not sure where the injury came from, but they say he is doing better every single day. From our Midwest Bureau, check out this security camera video of an Illinois police officer making an unusual house call. The officer completed a food delivery after he arrested the driver before the food was dropped off. You could see him handing the bag of food to the person who lives there who ordered the food. No word on why the driver, the deliverer, was busted in the first place. So now we want to bring you today's original with in-depth reporting on a topic we've been keeping an eye on. And tonight it's an NBC News exclusive about an effort in Congress, to tackle concerns that the genetic data of Americans is being collected and possibly exploited by China. As the use of DNA data expands and helps with everything from solving crimes to preventing diseases, lawmakers from both parties are now trying to ban a Chinese genomics company from getting federal money and putting out a new bill just today. NBC's Ken Delanian has that story.
It's one of the most promising advances in modern medical history, with the potential to cure disease and customize medical treatments. But the DNA data revolution also has a dark side. For years, the U.S. intelligence community has warned that China is assembling huge databases of genetic information, including about Americans. Officials have cautioned that it could be used to tailor bioweapons, hunt for vulnerabilities that might make people susceptible to recruitment as spies, or allow China to pull ahead of the West in the hugely consequential biotechnology sphere. Tonight, lawmakers from both parties are offering a response to what they see as a grave threat, introducing legislation that would ban a major Chinese genomics firm, BGI Group, and anyone it partners with from receiving federal contracts.
We don't want taxpayer dollars being used to purchase, genome sequencing machines from BGI or their testing materials because of our concerns.
It was designated a Chinese military company by the Pentagon after its efforts to harvest DNA were revealed, and yet it remains a leading supplier of genetic sequencing equipment within the American market. We think that's a bad idea, and that's what we're trying to stop.
BGI is one of the world's largest genomics companies with well-documented ties to China's military, according to the Defense Department. Export restrictions have been placed on 5 of its affiliates by the U.S. Commerce Department, which found that at least 2 of them had used technology to repress the Uyghurs and other ethnic minorities in China, something the company has previously denied. The Commerce Department also found a significant risk that genetic data would be diverted to China's military programs.
An accurate, comprehensive, and affordable non-invasive prenatal test.
In 2021, an investigation by Reuters reported that a prenatal test offered by the company in 53 countries, but not the U.S., was developed in conjunction with China's military and was being used to collect the genetic data of millions of people. In a statement, BGI told NBC News the company does not operate clinical laboratories or collect patient samples and has no access to personal or genetic data. The statement added that none of BGI is in any way controlled by or linked to the Chinese government or the military, which U.S. lawmakers dispute.
Not only do they have collaboration, but they've published numerous papers in conjunction with the PLA with regard to their research.
Genomics and DNA is the new oil. It's a $4 trillion industry.
Bill Evanina, who retired in 2021 as the top U.S. counterintelligence official, worked for years to sound the alarm on BGI and other Chinese companies gathering genetic data.
It's legitimate business that's also masking and intelligence gathering and nefarious purposes, right?
There's also, though, the question of using it to, for example, exploit vulnerabilities and recruit spies and potentially tailor bioweapons, right?
Well, the bioweapons, yes. So that's a whole other story altogether. More importantly, Ken, we look at it from a targeting perspective. Let's assume hypothetically they have the ability to say, oh, look at Bill Evanina. Okay, we just found out from all these data breaches, he's behind on his mortgage. He lost his job. He's got 2 kids in college. Oh, and he's got a genetic sequencing marker that shows him predisposed to having hepatitis or, Parkinson's or that. He's very vulnerable.
Evanina said the U.S. intelligence community has seen evidence of China's intent to exploit genetic data.
We know this because we collect this data from them covertly, right? This is not like made up stuff. Like there is clandestine collection of their intent and their capability.
NBC's Ken Delanian is in the newsroom with more on this. You and I were talking in the newsroom, and this is really eye-opening. But, I think a lot of people may think HIPAA laws should protect Americans from their data being shared. It should, right?
It absolutely should, Tom. But in some cases, there are user agreements that people sign that allow that data to be transferred. And in other cases, U.S. officials are just concerned that they're doing it illicitly. Now, obviously, you saw that this company denies doing anything of the kind. But here's what the U.S. intelligence community knows. They know that China is building vast databases of genetic information, including Americans. They know that they've acquired various companies in the United States that has given them access to genetic information. They don't know exactly what BGI is doing with all its devices and all its areas in the United States, but they are concerned that there's a huge risk because BGI is tied to the Chinese military.
It's an important story. Ken, thank you for bringing it to us. Ken Delanian. Still to come from us, new safety features from Meta that will change who can message teenagers on Facebook and Instagram. What watchdogs think of these new updates? That's coming up next. Okay, we're back. Do you have a teen? Are you a teen or a tween? Well, Facebook and Instagram are tightening some default settings in their apps, making it harder for strangers to send direct messages to teens as part of new guidelines and safety features announced today by the parent company Meta. On Instagram, teens will only get DMs from people they follow or are connected to, and parental approval will be required to change certain default settings. And then on Facebook Messenger, users under 16 will only receive messages from Facebook friends or people in their phone contacts, while adults, people older than 19, can't message teens who don't follow them. Now, the changes come as Meta is facing new attempts at regulation and state lawsuits alleging harmful youth marketing. NBC's Stephanie Gosk is on this story. And Stephanie, Meta has faced an awful lot of criticism and pressure for how it does or doesn't protect minors on its platform. So now walk us through these guidelines and how are watchdogs responding. Is it a good idea?
Well, they're calling it window dressing, Tom, which is to say they don't really think this is going to be effective. But Meta is rolling this out. They had other changes that they rolled out earlier this month. And the idea is that when you have kids 13, 14, 15 years old on these platforms, that people won't be able to directly message them. And that if teens try to change that setting, their parent will get a message saying, do you approve of that change? And only if they sign off will it be changed. But they're not sure, the watchdogs, that this is actually going to work. I spoke to the CEO of Common Sense Media. Listen to what he had to say to me.
What you see is almost half-hearted measures by companies like Meta that say, we're trying to do right by our teens. But in truth, they're only doing something that every teenager in America knows how to get around, and that won't be effective.
Yeah, so ultimately what they're calling on is for the federal government, Tom, to step in and not leave it up to these companies to do it themselves.
Oh, yeah. Okay, here's the skeptic in me, having had teenage daughters. They're older now. But these changes are not foolproof, right? Because the parental supervision option has to be enabled, and then the user's age has to be accurate in the app. And I got to tell you, as a parent, sometimes I'm like, I have no idea what little thing I'm supposed to flip. The kids know so much more than we do.
They do. I asked the CEO of Common Sense Media specifically, how tough would it be for a teenager to fake their age? And he said it would be incredibly simple. But, you know, I asked Meta that specific question. They said that it is a complex industry problem to establish age verification. They also said they support a measure, a proposed federal law that would require app stores to get parental permission for kids to download apps onto their phones, which is to say, Tom, they haven't really figured this out yet, have they?
No, of course not. I mean, I need my teens to tell me how to use my phone, and now I'm supposed to. It's not going to work.
That
Stephanie,
seems like a different problem, Tom.
Well, yes, it could be. Stephanie, thank you. That is a wrap for us at this hour, and the news continues right now on NBC News Now. Okay, here we go. Top of the hour, 6 o'clock on the East Coast. We come on the air tonight with rain pouring over the southeast, causing a huge mess and becoming deadly. People, animals trapped by the floodwaters. Crews racing to try to drain all of that rain somehow, but it doesn't seem fast enough. We are live on the ground. Plus, the former president making a very brief appearance on the witness stand in a New York courtroom today. Why his words had to be almost immediately stricken from the record. And then listen to this. Taylor Swift's repeat stalker showing up again at her house after having just been ordered to stay away from her. And it's not just her. Why it seems like when it comes to female celebrities dealing with obsessive stalkers, law enforcement kinds of just shrugs it off. Plus, big news on the economy, the U.S. growth shattering the expectations. But why do so many people still feel like they're in a bad spot financially? And then Alabama set to move forward with a controversial method of execution of a man convicted of murder. Why the family of the murder victim says they are frustrated and why it has come to this after so long. Good day, I'm Tom Costello in for Hallie, and we come on the air today with major flood concerns throughout the southeast, with more rain pounding the region. One person, I should say, dead after losing control of his or her car, a scenario that we have seen throughout the region. Take a look here. A man used a ladder placed on top of his car to get out of a water-filled ditch outside of Houston. He reportedly hydroplaned off the road. Crews have been out rescuing both people and animals from flooded roads and neighborhoods. Right now, nearly 20 million people are under flood watches. Louisiana, living up to its reputation along the bayou, the roads in some neighborhoods overtaken by water. And it's the nonstop rain that's creating such a mess because there's just not enough time for the water to drain away. In southeast Texas, 24 rivers forecast to reach major to moderate flood stages over the next day or so, if they haven't already. Overall, this month has been an unusually wet one from Texas to the Northeast, with many areas seeing more than double their average rainfall. So let's bring in now NBC's Kathy Park. She's in Chattanooga, Tennessee. You're out by a dam helping that community to keep it from being flooded, but not every area has that kind of protection, right? And these storms have just been relentless. What's the major concern right now?
Hey there, Tom. Good to be with you. Yeah, so the big concern is that the flash flood threat really isn't over. The heaviest rain shifted from Mississippi, Alabama to Tennessee. Here in Chattanooga, where we've been all day, we've been slammed with several rounds of heavy showers, and that's a big problem because we're dealing with a whole lot of runoff. And Tom, you might remember this region got slammed with a lot of snow this time last week. Some parts of the state saw 8 inches of snow, and temperatures today, Tom, in the 60s. So all of that snow that was on the ground has melted. And speaking of runoff, you probably see some of that behind me. I promise there is a working dam behind me. We should know another weather headline that we're following is this dense fog. Millions from the Midwest all the way to the East Coast are under a dense fog advisory. But we are told that roughly 700,000 gallons of water is spilling over this dam right now. Last week, that number was closer to 400,000. So a big change just in the volume of water because of that runoff. But fortunately, though, Tom, no major problems to report. The dam is working. This dam is critical, especially here in Chattanooga, because it holds that runoff and then prevents any sort of flooding in Chattanooga and other cities downstream. But really across the Southeast, as you mentioned, we are dealing with a lot of issues with flash floods. The ground is already saturated, and there are some spots that saw 10 inches of rain in just a short amount of time. So that water really has nowhere to go. In fact, just north of Houston in San Jacinto County, a judge declared an emergency declaration urging residents to voluntarily evacuate because the danger was imminent. There was so much rising water. Meanwhile, we saw some dramatic images of people just stranded, motorists being stranded, the water just rising that quickly. So this is a concern all across the Southeast, and especially in Louisiana. They're not in the clear just yet because rain is in the forecast tomorrow as well as Saturday. Tom?
Boy, it is wet and foggy behind you. All right, Kathy, thank you very much. Yeah. Now to a New York courtroom where former President Trump spent under 5 minutes on the stand in the civil defamation case against him, with some of his words stricken from the record seconds after he started to speak. Mr. Trump tried to deny the allegations made by the writer E. Jean Carroll that he sexually assaulted her, saying he considers it a false accusation. But here's the thing. He really can't say that. Why? Because this isn't up for debate any longer. A separate jury has already found him liable for sexually assaulting Carroll. You see her leaving court there today. This trial is only about how much money Mr. Trump might have to pay her. And what we're seeing here is another example of Trump's strategy as he faces a whole web of legal issues to try to run out the clock until the 2024 election and then maintain his innocence no matter what. NBC's Rahema Ellis has been following the legal developments on the case. Rahema, there wasn't a ton of back and forth today with Mr. Trump and the judge. So walk us through what happened.
Well, it was an incredibly tense time in this courtroom. And even before the jurors were brought in for Mr. Trump's testimony, he was admonished by the judge because they were going over what you will, they call it a proffer, what he would be allowed to say and not say. And as he was being told what he wouldn't be allowed to say, that's when Trump broke in and he started saying the very things about he didn't know anything about who this woman was. At that point, the judge told him, keep your voice down. You're interrupting these proceedings, and that is not permitted. Once on the stand, he got admonished again by the judge because he, as you pointed out in the lead-in, he started saying things that the judge says are not in question. It's already been determined that you sexually assaulted her. And he told the judge, these things you're hearing should be stricken from the record. The question becomes one, Tom, of whether or not you can unring that bell with the jury once they've heard it.
Yeah, that's right. They've heard it. Listen, legal experts say that he could face millions of dollars in damages. And I know you've got a graphic to walk us through this, but this is Mr. Trump, who's a billionaire. It may not matter to him, right? The cost may not matter because he views this as kind of an election tactic.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that because part of what was played for the jury today was his deposition from the first trial. And in that, he talked about how much of a billionaire was. He was bragging about the billions of dollars that he has. This evidence was presented by E. Jean Carroll's team, and supposedly, would imagine it's for those jurors they wanted them to hear as they start considering how much they should award E. Jean Carroll. Look at some of these numbers. She's already been awarded $5 million from the first trial against Trump. She's now seeking $10 million in this case. And an expert testified for Carroll Trump that it would cost about $7 to $12 million alone to repair her reputation. But there's also punitive damages that can be awarded in this. There's no limit on what that could be. It could be a lot. It could be nothing at all. But again, based on what they were presenting, it could be a lot. Tom? And
remember the astronomical amount of money that those Georgia election workers were awarded after being maligned by the Trump attorney. The Trump attorney and also the former mayor of New York, Giuliani. So you never know where these numbers are going. Rahema, thank you very much. Rahema Ellis. All right, stick with that now, the thread of the former president's legal troubles, because down in Georgia, his lawyer is joining a motion trying to dismiss the election interference case against him over allegations made by one of his co-defendants that Fulton County DA Fannie Willis is having an improper romantic relationship with one of her special prosecutors, Nathan Wade, and then financially benefiting from that relationship. In a statement to NBC News, Mr. Trump's lawyer also accuses Willis of attempting to, quote, foment racial animus and prejudice to divert attention from her alleged improprieties. NBC's Blaine Alexander is in Atlanta. And Blaine, what's the argument from Mr. Trump's lawyer here?
Well, it's a twofold argument, Tom. One, he is signing on to those allegations by Michael Roman and his attorney that there's an improper relationship going on between the two prosecutors and that Fani Willis is benefiting from it. But the other prong of that is basically he's saying he's pointing to the speech that Fani Willis gave on MLK Day in front of a historically black church, saying that she is improperly injecting racial animus into this case. Here, I want to read you a section of that filing. He says, these assertions by the DA engender a great likelihood of substantial prejudice toward the defendants in the eyes of the public in general. Moreover, the DA's self-serving comments came with the added, sought-after benefit of garnering racially based sympathy for her self-inflicted quagmire. Now, we suspect that all of this will be brought up in the hearing that's been set for February 15th. But in the meanwhile, DA Willis has not responded directly to these allegations, though her office tells me that she plans to, in a written court filing. A judge has set a deadline of February 2nd, Tom.
Blaine, that is an unbelievable rainstorm behind you, so we're going to let you get out of it before you get drenched. But thank you very much. Blaine Alexander following it all from Atlanta. All right, things got emotional in a Michigan courtroom today in an unprecedented trial of the mother of a mass murder shooter, with a prosecutor pinning the blame on her, the mother, for not stopping her son. There's Jennifer Crumbley right there crying as the prosecution shows a witness video of the shooting where 4 Oxford high school students were killed. One witness, a teacher who was hurt in that shooting, told the jury about the moments that she came face to face with her shooter.
I locked eyes, and then instantly I noticed I see some movement, and so I looked down, and I realized he's raising a gun to me. Everything that I knew to be reality wasn't.
This trial and another one coming up for James Crumbley, the shooter's father, they're both important because they mark the first time in America, really, that parents are being tried for charges in the deaths of a mass shooting that their child committed. Both parents are facing 4 counts of involuntary manslaughter, which could land them in prison for up to 15 years and a $7,500 fine per charge. Remember, Ethan Crumbley was sentenced to life behind bars for taking the lives of these 4 teens that you see right there. NBC's Jesse Kirsch joins me now from Pontiac, Michigan, where the trial is underway. Jesse, court wrapped up for the day, I know, in just the last hour or so. It was a heavy day of reliving something very traumatic, especially for some of these witnesses, right? And at one point, I understand things got pretty intense. Prosecutors saying that the Crumbley wasn't following court instruction, right? The Miss Crumbley wasn't following court instruction.
Yeah, so Tom, a lot of the details that were discussed today are out there in the public, but of course, as is always the case in a trial of this kind, the jury is instructed to not be paying attention to outside reporting from the media such as ourselves. And so prosecutors were laying out the timeline of what unfolded in the days leading up to the shooting and on the day of the shooting, as you just showed some of that testimony, the harrowing accounts from those who were at Oxford High School on that day. And at one point in court, a video of the shooting was being played, and the defendant, Jennifer Crumbley, was watching this. And again, this is her watching her son on camera carry out a deadly massacre, and she became extremely emotional. Her defense team asked for a brief recess, and the prosecution took issue with this because the prosecution was contending that the judge had wanted everyone involved to be restraining the amount of emotion being shown in the courtroom, and was contending that the defense team was not subscribing to that, and the defense pushed back on that as well. So there was a little bit of a tiff there. There was a brief recess. Things moved forward, but that was certainly a flashpoint between the two sides at one point earlier in the day.
Jesse, I know you covered the mass murder itself, and we mentioned the significance of this case because this is something that we're seeing play out really for the first time. How are we seeing both sides' cases show up here?
Yeah, and To make a point to that, Tom, representatives from a U.S. Attorney's Office, federal prosecutors, were in attendance today, according to our team, in the courtroom to observe what was going on. And I think that just speaks to the broader attention that this case and the unique circumstances of it are garnering at this point. What we heard from prosecutors was, again, them laying out the timeline. They showed videos, they showed text messages, they showed photos from before the shooting, making it clear that the parents were aware that their son had an interest in guns. And that leads up to the moment just hours before the shooting when they were presented with a handwritten message, a literal plea for help, and also a drawing of a gun that was found with their son. And confronted with that information, prosecutors arguing that they failed to act in that moment, of course, with the knowledge that they had just gifted their son a gun, according to prosecutors. So that's the prosecution side. From the defense side, this is interesting, Tom, because as you mentioned, both the mother and father of Ethan Crumbley are facing charges. However, they are being tried separately. And so we saw some divergence in how these two cases could play out today. Jennifer Crumbley suggesting that her husband was the one who was responsible for keeping the gun secured, keeping the gun stored in the home. So she and the defense team also saying that Jennifer Crumbley didn't really know much about guns, even though there was video shown of Jennifer Crumbley at a shooting range. So clearly you can see that Ethan Crumbley's mother is trying to, at arm's length, keep herself from her husband in terms of degrees of responsibility when it came to the gun safety and the knowledge of guns in that family's household, Tom.
Jesse, I've got 10 seconds, but are the Crumbleys still married?
They are, to the best of our knowledge, still husband and wife, and that's how it continues to be described, Tom.
Interesting playing out in court. Jesse, thank you very much. Other news now, Boeing's CEO was back on Capitol Hill here in Washington today, talking about transparency and responsibility as all eyes are on Boeing after the recent Alaska Airlines mid-air emergency when a door plug blew out. Airline and FAA confidence in Boeing has dramatically eroded after that incident 3 weeks ago and 2 fatal MAX 8 crashes overseas 5 years ago. Many passengers now express concern about flying on a Boeing plane. Since the Alaska Airlines emergency, the FAA has grounded all MAX 9s. Alaska and United, though, the only airlines to fly the plane, have been inspecting their fleet for any signs of problems, and the MAX 9 should be cleared to fly as soon as tomorrow, according to the FAA and the airlines. Without the MAX 9, though, both airlines have had to cancel hundreds of flights a day, hundreds of thousands of passengers affected so far. Airline profits have also taken a hit. NBC's Sahil Kapoor following all of this now on Capitol Hill. And Sahil, the FAA has clearly, I can tell you from personal conversations, run out of patience with Boeing over the last few years, and now essentially ordering a pause to the Boeing production line. No expansion, no extra planes to come off the line. And Boeing is already warning of delays in delivering planes as it struggles to keep up with orders, right? So now lawmakers are talking about holding hearings to look into this. And a few years ago, they did the exact same thing, and it got pretty heated.
That's absolutely right, Tom. Senator Maria Cantwell told NBC News that the Senate Commerce Committee that she chairs will hold a public hearing into this that will feature testimony from David Calhoun, the Boeing CEO. She said she did meet with him, that it was a productive meeting, but she still doesn't have a good sense, and her committee still doesn't have a good sense of what exactly went wrong here, particularly in this Alaska Airlines incident. She said they're looking at ongoing investigations, including with the National Transportation Safety Board, the NTSB. She wants to know how long that'll take so they can plan accordingly. She said it can't take too long. Hypothetically, Cantwell said if it takes 6 months, that's not going to work for her. She doesn't have 6 months. The committee doesn't have 6 months to figure this out. Beyond that, the ranking member, Senator Ted Cruz, also spoke about this in broad terms. Let's play what he said.
It is a miracle that nobody was killed. Nothing is more important than ensuring that the flying public is safe and that they can be confident when they get on a plane, when you take your children and put them on a plane, that your family's going to be safe.
And of course, this committee and Congress at large will have a large role in, in effectuating that, particularly with FAA reauthorization, a major deadline for that coming up on March 8th.
Yeah, it's just amazing also how much goodwill that Boeing has lost now. I mean, United now talking about buying Airbus planes instead of Boeing planes. My conversation with the CEO of Alaska, clearly absolutely furious, he admits, furious with Boeing for putting the lives of his passengers at risk. And now the Transportation Department Secretary Pete Buttigieg saying maybe they need to change this whole government oversight of how they kind of deputize Boeing employees to act as, if you will, FAA inspectors, being the eyes and ears of the FAA in the plant. That seems to be a conflict of interest and may not have worked.
Right. A couple of things here, Tom. Secretary Pete Buttigieg did talk about this. He said they're looking specifically at manufacturing problems with the Boeing 737 MAX 9. He talked about, quote, a bigger picture examination of any and all quality issues, suggesting that this goes beyond simply one plane, or at least the government's response needs to be to look at this in a more holistic manner. Beyond that, Senator Cantwell talked about this upcoming March 8th deadline for FAA reauthorization, which will include matters of aviation safety, air traffic controller capacity, as well as oversight. She said there are several specific amendments as part of that package that would respond to issues in this particular incident with Alaska Airlines. And beyond that, they want to get to the broader oversight of both the FAA and the manufacturers to deal with safety precautions. Tom.
All right, Sahil, thank you very much. Good information from Capitol Hill. New numbers out today show the economy finished strong in 2023, crushing estimates for a year that many thought could bring the country into a recession. The GDP grew at a rate of more than 3%, 3.3% in the fourth quarter. And while that's slower than Q3, when it grew by about 5%, much better than expected. Economists say it shows the resilience of the post-pandemic recovery. It caps off a year when unemployment stayed at or under 50-year lows and inflation cooled. More indications that would point away from a recession. But are Americans buying it? The president hopes so. He's out visiting Wisconsin today, touting his Bidenomics plan. Take a listen.
The experts from the time I got elected were insisting that a recession was just around the corner. Every month there was going to be a recession. Well, you know, we've got really strong growth. We obviously have more work to do, but we're making real progress, building an economy from the middle out and the bottom up and not the top down.
Incidentally, the UAW has endorsed President Biden for president. NBC's Brian Chung joins me now to break down all of the numbers. Brian, let's look at the broader numbers, right, and how they square with how everyday people view the economy they live in. Because we have this Harvard poll that found that while young Americans have a positive view of their personal financial situation, a majority have a negative perception of America's economy overall. How do you square that up?
Yeah, well, I mean, here's the thing, and we have to acknowledge that consumer sentiment has been trending up. In fact, one measure has gone up by 28% just since November. So some of that has been changing. But look, broadly speaking, people are still dealing with the ripple effects of the high inflation that we saw in 2022 into the early parts of 2023. That picture has since improved. But when you look broadly, it takes time for things that are happening in the economy to be felt in Americans' households and the way that they're using their wallets. So when it comes to the overall picture, that we have to acknowledge what happened in 2023 is pretty remarkable. I mean, you said crushing it. That's the right way to accurately portray this, because the story going into 2023 was concerns about a recession where you'd see the unemployment rate rise as the Federal Reserve raised interest rates. And instead, the Federal Reserve was able to raise interest rates. The unemployment rate never went above 4% for the entirety of last year. And the GDP numbers we got this morning verify that the economy grew in 2023.
You know, I think you're 100% right, but we still have inflation that's up something like, I don't know, 17% if you look at it from where we were 2-3 years ago. So when you go to the grocery store, people feel that. And they feel it in the housing market, right? Because mortgage rates are still very high. You've got to be making a six-figure income these days to buy a home. And then we've got another Harvard study here that says housing is unaffordable for a record half of all U.S. renters. Talk us through these housing numbers and how unaffordable stuff is if you just want to try to, you know, get out from under your parents' roof.
Yeah, and I think a big part of the economic feel that we have here is also the dream of home ownership essentially being watered down by these high mortgage rates and continuing appreciation of home values. So for a lot of millennials especially that have been trying to get into the market, and you're being dissuaded not only by the fact that the home price is up 20 to 30%, but that the borrowing costs to get that home are also going up as well. We're looking at a median of somewhere around 6.6% to get a 30-year fixed mortgage. So the story, though, is about supply, because we know that a lot of people that have homes right now are not going to try to sell it into a market that has 6.6% rates. So that settling has had a lot of existing home owners not wanting to go back into the market to sell it. So if there's not new supply coming online, then it makes that dream of homeownership even more unreachable. So can supply catch up? It takes time for home builders to make new housing supply. That's going to be a big story, and something that a lot of economists are saying is going to be the real key to trying to alleviate these pressures in the housing market, Tom.
Yeah, and the strange thing is that really the numbers today were so remarkable because it does appear that the economy is shaping up pretty much exactly as the Fed had hoped when it started hiking interest rates to tame inflation. But this is an election year. Exit polls matter, and they just showed this week that the economy still is issue number one, right? So this disconnect between the real stats and the perception or the reality that people live with every day could be something that could be a problem for the president.
Yeah, well, here's the thing. There's still many months until the election. And the story here is that with inflation, we don't know what the development is going to be. There's concern even within the Federal Reserve, based off of what I've been hearing, that inflation could go in the reverse. It's been coming down over the course of 2023, but maybe it goes in the opposite direction. It's really hard to predict. If that happens, could that threaten the messaging that the Biden administration has been putting out there? Again, it's going to take time to see. Those reports come out on a monthly basis, and we'll be watching very closely.
You know, Brian, what I always say, economists have predicted 10 of the last 2 recessions. So be an optimist, Brian. You're a millennial. Be an optimist. All right. Check with you later. Thanks, buddy. Appreciate it. Coming up from us, some popular cold and flu cough syrups are getting recalled, why they could pose a big risk. Plus, a scary scene in Turkey after a plane was forced to fly dangerously close to traffic. What happened later in the hour? We're back, bottom of the hour, and tonight Alabama is planning to put to death a man convicted of murder using a method of execution never been tried before in this country. It is so untested. The pastor who will be with this condemned man at the time of his death is also actually at risk. Now, the state received the okay from a federal appeals court late last night to execute Kenneth Eugene Smith using nitrogen hypoxia. It involves strapping a mask to his face to feed him only nitrogen gas, no oxygen. And the 58-year-old is on death row for his role in the 1988 murder of Elizabeth Sennett. The state is using this method because prison staff failed to execute him by lethal injection 18 months ago when they couldn't find the right vein. NBC's Morgan Chesky is following this all from Dallas. And Morgan, we're hearing from the children of Elizabeth Sennett who are furious that it's taking this long to get justice, right?
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Tom. In fact, one of the key lines they've said throughout this entire process is that this man has now been on death row longer than they were even able to know their mother, who, as you mentioned, was murdered back in 1988. I want you to hear more from one of her sons in light of this execution, which is tentatively supposed to happen later this evening. Take a listen.
He admitted to it. He wrote it down on paper. He was guilty. So how does that turn into a 35-year wait to get justice for what our mother suffered from? You know, he asked for this hypoxia, whatever you call it, and now he's fussing because he's got to do it.
Now, some important backstory here on this legal process, Tom. This man, Kenneth Eugene Smith, was convicted in '89 for this murder for hire plot, but then was later cleared on appeal, but then reconvicted in 1996. It was that year that a jury voted 11-1 and recommended life in prison to the judge in Alabama, who then chose to override that jury recommendation and instead give a death sentence to Kenneth Smith. And that's what brings us to today, Tom. Important to note here that an Alabama judge can no longer override a jury decision in cases that involve the death penalty. Tom?
Yeah, but he did before that change in the law, and there's no debating Smith's guilty plea, but there are significant questions about this method of execution, right? To the point that even the pastor who's going to be with him is receiving his own last rites because he's at risk.
Right, and we had a chance to hear from the pastor earlier today who essentially expressed the fact that there was a lot of concern since this is a new and untested form of execution, and he was asking questions about safety and protocol and such, and was not receiving, at least in his mind, an adequate answer that made him feel reassured since he will be there in the room performing last rites to the inmate. So a lot of questions right now because this is the first time the U.S. has ever used this form of execution. First time here, if not the world, Tom. And there is an anticipation of more legal challenges in the final hours before this takes place. But again, we had Smith's legal team make a plea to the Supreme Court saying that he shouldn't face an execution a second time. That was overruled. And then we heard from that appeals court saying that because they failed to prove this was a cruel and unusual punishment, it still goes ahead, at least for now. Tom?
All right, Morgan, thank you. Morgan Chesky. Let's get you over now to the 5 things our team thinks you might want to know about tonight. Number 1, CIA Director Bill Burns is set to meet with Israel's Mossad director and the Qatari Prime Minister in Europe this weekend. They're supposed to be talking about a deal to secure the release of more than 130 hostages still held in Gaza. That, according to a diplomat with knowledge of the matter. Number 2, the maker of Robitussin has issued a voluntary recall of 2 cough syrups over microbial contamination. Robitussin Honey CF Max Day Adult and Robitussin Honey CF Max Nighttime Adult are the affected products. The company says it has not received any reports of adverse effects so far, but it says using those products could lead to potentially life-threatening health problems. Number 3, former Spanish soccer president Luis Rubiales will face trial for kissing player Jenny Hermoso without her consent after the Women's World Cup last year. State prosecutors accuse Rubiales of sexual assault and for allegedly, this is important, coercing her to publicly support him after he faced the backlash. He has denied any wrongdoing. It's not clear when the trial might start. Number 4, former Trump White House advisor Peter Navarro sentenced today to 4 months in prison. He is also forced to pay an almost $10,000 fine for defying a subpoena from the January 6th committee. Now, remember, he was convicted in September for refusing to testify and provide documents to a House committee investigating the insurrection and the attack. Navarro has already filed an appeal. Number 5, actor Tom Hollander says he once received a different famous British Tom's paycheck because they have similar names. This guy here, Tom Holland, basically. But Hollander says that he was once sent a 7-figure box office bonus that actually belonged to Tom Holland for The Avengers, a movie that Hollander did not star in. He's an honest guy. And now to politics with Nikki Haley still in the race, chasing frontrunner former President Trump. What's her path to a Republican nomination? Officially, candidates need to earn a certain number of delegates to win. Von Hilliard now explains the process in tonight's breakdown.
To get their party's presidential nomination, candidates ultimately need one thing: delegates.
Mr. Chairman, delegates and my fellow citizens, I proudly accept your nomination.
A delegate is someone, often a party insider or activist, who represents their community or state at these big party nominating conventions. One for Democrats and one for Republicans. A couple thousand delegates show up to each. Candidates earn delegates from getting votes in primaries and caucuses. So how are they divvied up? Democrats do it the same across the board. All statewide and district delegates are divided proportionally based on the election results. So if a candidate gets 60% of the vote in a state, they'll get about 60% of the delegates. But Republicans have a few different methods: proportional, especially in early states like in New Hampshire, or winner-take-all, where the candidate who gets the most votes gets all the delegates, like in Arizona. And then some states use a mix. The magic number is 1,215 delegates for Republican candidates to secure the nomination. If they don't lock in the majority of delegates ahead of time, it'll come down to the convention. Now, there are 2 main types of delegates. Democrats call them pledged and unpledged. Republicans call them bound and unbound. Basically, if a delegate is pledged or bound, they have to vote for a certain candidate at the convention based on how their state voted. But unpledged and unbound delegates can vote for any candidate. It's a small slice of the total delegates, but they could make a difference. Which brings us back to 1976.
We came from behind in New Hampshire and we won.
Through the Republican primaries and caucuses that year, incumbent President Gerald Ford didn't reach the magic number needed to lock up the nomination. A month before the convention, insurgent candidate Ronald Reagan trailed Ford by only 39 delegates, with 94 still uncommitted, which made the convention extra interesting. Ford ended up winning by about 100 delegates.
I am honored by your nomination, and I accept it.
Now this year, Nikki Haley's already trailing Donald Trump, with 17 delegates to Trump's 32. But over the last year, some state GOPs changed the system to favor a frontrunner, making the path to a nomination even harder for Haley. California's GOP, for example, adopted new rules ahead of this cycle. Any Republican candidate who wins more than half the vote there will get all the delegates. And California has 169 of them, more than any other state. What about the dozen delegates that Ron DeSantis and Vivek Ramaswamy secured in Iowa? The former candidates now backing Trump, but their delegates still need to support them on the first ballot of the convention. There is an exception, though, if there's just one Republican candidate left. Vaughn Hilliard, NBC News.
When we come back, Taylor Swift's alleged stalker spotted at her house again just hours after leaving court. Why it's so hard to keep people safe from their stalkers. Plus, a new culinary craze in South Korea is prompting warnings from health officials. We'll explain that when we come back next. So NBC News covers hundreds of international stories each day, and it's awfully tough to stay on top of all of them. So our international teams have done it for all of us. And here are some of the things they're keeping an eye on. It's a segment we call The Global. In Argentina, thousands of people took to Buenos Aires today as part of a huge trade union protest against the country's new president. They're pushing back on his plans for sweeping cuts to government services aimed at curbing the country's skyrocketing inflation. In Turkey, so NBC News covers hundreds of international stories each day, and it's awfully tough to stay on top of all of them. So our international teams have done it for all of us. And here are some of the things they're keeping an eye on. It's a segment we call The Global. In Argentina, thousands of people took to the streets of Buenos Aires today as part of a huge trade union protest against the country's new president. They're pushing back on his plans for sweeping cuts to government services aimed at curbing the country's skyrocketing inflation. In Turkey, check this out. This crazy video of a Turkish military plane making an emergency landing right over a busy street. The military says the plane had to land because of a technical problem. Turkey's defense minister said there was some damage to the plane, but the pilot and crew all got out unharmed. In South Korea, the country's food ministry telling people to stop eating this deep-fried toothpicks. They're made of biodegradable cornstarch or sweet potato coated in some sort of a seasoning. Videos of people eating them have gotten a ton of likes and shares online. They're still technically a sanitary product, and food officials say their safety has not been verified. So now we want to bring you today's original with in-depth reporting on a topic we've been keeping an eye on. And tonight it's an NBC News exclusive about an effort in Congress, to tackle concerns that the genetic data of Americans is being collected and possibly exploited by China. As the use of DNA data expands and helps with everything from solving crimes to preventing diseases, lawmakers from both parties are now trying to ban a Chinese genomics company from getting federal money and putting out a new bill just today. NBC's Ken Delanian has that story.
It's one of the most promising advances in modern medical history, with the potential to cure disease and customize medical treatments. But the DNA data revolution also has a dark side. For years, the U.S. intelligence community has warned that China is assembling huge databases of genetic information, including about Americans. Officials have cautioned that it could be used to tailor bioweapons, hunt for vulnerabilities that might make people susceptible to recruitment as spies, or allow China to pull ahead of the West in the hugely consequential biotechnology sphere. Tonight, lawmakers from both parties are offering a response to what they see as a grave threat, introducing legislation that would ban a major Chinese genomics firm, BGI Group, and anyone it partners with from receiving federal contracts.
We don't want taxpayer dollars being used to purchase, genome sequencing machines from BGI or their testing materials because of our concerns.
It was designated a Chinese military company by the Pentagon after its efforts to harvest DNA were revealed, and yet it remains a leading supplier of genetic sequencing equipment within the American market. We think that's a bad idea, and that's what we're trying to stop.
BGI is one of the world's largest genomics companies with well-documented ties to China's military, according to the Defense Department. Export restrictions have been placed on 5 of its affiliates by the U.S. Commerce Department, which found that at least 2 of them had used technology to repress the Uyghurs and other ethnic minorities in China, something the company has previously denied. The Commerce Department also found a significant risk that genetic data would be diverted to China's military programs.
An accurate, comprehensive, and affordable non-invasive prenatal test.
In 2021, an investigation by Reuters reported that a prenatal test offered by the company in 53 countries, but not the U.S., was developed in conjunction with China's military and was being used to collect the genetic data of millions of people. In a statement, BGI told NBC News the company does not operate clinical laboratories or collect patient samples and has no access to personal or genetic data. The statement added that none of BGI is in any way controlled by or linked to the Chinese government or the military, which U.S. lawmakers dispute.
Not only do they have collaboration, but they've published numerous papers in conjunction with the PLA with regard to their research.
Genomics and DNA is the new oil. It's a $4 trillion industry.
Bill Evanina, who retired in 2021 as the top U.S. counterintelligence official, worked for years to sound the alarm on BGI and other Chinese companies gathering genetic data.
It's legitimate business that's also masking and intelligence gathering and nefarious purposes, right?
There's also, though, a question of using it to, for example, exploit vulnerabilities and recruit spies and potentially tailor bioweapons, right?
Well, the bioweapons, yes. So that's a whole other story altogether. More importantly, Ken, we look at it from a targeting perspective. Let's assume, hypothetically, they have the ability to say, oh, look at Bill Evanina. Okay, we just found out from all these data breaches, he's behind on his mortgage. He lost his job. He's got 2 kids in college. Oh, and he's got a genetic sequencing marker that shows him predisposed to having hepatitis or, Parkinson's or this. He's very vulnerable.
Evanina said the U.S. intelligence community has seen evidence of China's intent to exploit genetic data.
We know this because we collect this data from them covertly, right? This is not like made up stuff. Like there is clandestine collection of their intent and their capability.
NBC's Ken Delanian is in the newsroom with more on this. You and I were talking in the newsroom, and this is really eye-opening. But, I think a lot of people may think HIPAA laws should protect Americans from their data being shared. It should, right?
It absolutely should, Tom. But in some cases, there are user agreements that people sign that allow that data to be transferred. And in other cases, U.S. officials are just concerned that they're doing it illicitly. Now, obviously, you saw that this company denies doing anything of the kind. But here's what the U.S. intelligence community knows. They know that China is building vast databases of genetic information, including Americans. They know that they've acquired various companies in the United States that has given them access to genetic information. They don't know exactly what BGI is doing with all its devices and all its areas in the United States, but they are concerned that there's a huge risk because BGI is tied to the Chinese military.
It's an important story. Ken, thank you for bringing it to us. Ken Delanian. Still to come from us, new safety features from Meta that will change who can message teenagers on Facebook and Instagram. What watchdogs think of these new updates, that's coming up next. Okay, we're back. Do you have a teen? Are you a teen or a tween? Well, Facebook and Instagram are tightening some default settings in their apps, making it harder for strangers to send direct messages to teens as part of new guidelines and safety features announced today by the parent company Meta. On Instagram, teens will only get DMs from people they follow or are connected to, and parental approval will be required to change certain default settings. And then on Facebook Messenger, users under 16 will only receive messages from Facebook friends or people in their phone contacts, while adults, people older than 19, can't message teens who don't follow them. Now, the changes come as Meta is facing new attempts at regulation and state lawsuits alleging harmful youth marketing. NBC's Stephanie Gosk is on the story. And Stephanie, Meta has faced an awful lot of criticism and pressure for how it does or doesn't protect minors on its platform. So now walk us through these guidelines and how are watchdogs responding. Is it a good idea?
Well, they're calling it window dressing, Tom, which is to say they don't really think this is going to be effective. But Meta is rolling this out. They had other changes that they rolled out earlier this month. And the idea is that when you have kids 13, 14, 15 years old on these platforms, that people won't be able to directly message them, and that if teens try to change that setting, their parent will get a message saying, do you approve of that change? And only if they sign off will it be changed. But they're not sure, the watchdogs, that this is actually going to work. I spoke to the CEO of Common Sense Media. Listen to what he had to say to me.
What you see is almost half-hearted measures by companies like Meta that say, we're trying to do right by our teens. But in truth, they're only doing something that every teenager in America knows how to get around, and that won't be effective.
Yeah, so ultimately what they're calling on is for the federal government, Tom, to step in and not leave it up to these companies to do it themselves.
Oh, yeah. Okay, here's the skeptic in me, having had teenage daughters. They're older now. But these changes are not foolproof, right? Because the parental supervision option has to be enabled, and then the user's age has to be accurate in the app. And I got to tell you, as a parent, sometimes I'm like, I have no idea what little thing I'm supposed to flip. The kids know so much more than we do.
They do. I asked the CEO of Common Sense Media specifically, how tough would it be for a teenager to fake their age? And he said it would be incredibly simple. But, you know, I asked Meta that specific question. They said that it is a complex industry problem to establish age verification. They also said they support a measure, a proposed federal law that would require app stores to get parental permission for kids to download apps onto their phones, which is to say, Tom, they haven't really figured this out yet, have they?
No, of course not. I mean, I need my teens to tell me how to use my phone, and now I'm supposed to. It's not going to work.
That
Stephanie,
seems like a different problem, Tom.
Well, yes, it could be. Stephanie, thank you. That is a wrap for us at this hour, and the news continues right now on NBC News Now.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.